So welcome to my talk on Pimp Your Parameters, the magic of argument completers. Who of you has used argument completers in the past? So what are you doing here? Not anymore. Okay, so first of all, thanks to our sponsors. Without them, this wouldn't be possible. So shout out to them. So who am I? I'm Emrys. I'm a team lead for a small team called Deployment and Automation at a company called Medavus in Germany. I've been in IT for the past 20 years. And about 16 years ago, I fell in love with PowerShell and I've never looked back. I'm very happy with my decision going down that path. And I absolutely hate PowerPoint. Don't understand it. So if you're like me, you might head over to PowerPoint is Fun, a website from Harm, MVP. Good website. Check it out if you hate PowerPoint, just like I do. So I don't want to bore you with any more. First of all, short introduction to argument completers, and then we'll just head into demos and be demos. I'm going to have a bit of a conclusion and Q&A at the end. So what are argument completers? Well, basically, they're just tab completion for your PowerShell parameters. It helps users by suggesting valid values for their parameters. Just helps them not have to know everything or type everything, giving them suggestions. So why do we want to use them? Well, basically, they'll just improve the user experience by reducing errors because you only get valid options presented. It speeds up writing, especially in a console. You can just type up, hit tab, get your options, and choose whatever you want. And it just generally makes scripts more intuitive and user-friendly. So, and that's my PowerPoint slides for you. Okay, so this is probably the easiest or the best known way of adding some sort of tab completion to your functions by using a validate set. So I can just add the attribute validate set and pass in an array of values, and then I can choose from them. So let's just load it. And then we can just do get color and choose our color. And we get our tab completion. Great. I can type in B and it will just extend to blue because it's the only option starting with a B. Works fine, but if we, for example, add in something which is not in that validate set, it doesn't work because I only can use those values in a validate set. I can't use anything else. So it's not extensible, it's not dynamic, but if you got a simple list, it's fine. Next, we could also achieve it by just using an enum. So I've defined here an enum for my vegetables because they are healthy. And I just got a function, and instead of expecting a string, I just say I want my veggies, and then I can use that again. I can use get vegetable, and I can alt tab, and I got my potatoes and all my vegetables. But once again, I can't add in what I want. It has to be a valid value from that enum. So then let's get into argument completers. So I've got this function, I've seen this many times. This is a wrong implementation of argument completers, but it sort of works and it demonstrates it. So if we want an argument completer, we use the argument completer attribute. And as you can see, within the brackets, there are squiggly brackets, so you pass in a script block. And in this case, in this script block, we've just got 3 values, an array. And this sort of works, but not properly. I'll show you an example. So first of all, alt tab works, I'm getting the options. But one thing you might see is we've got a different icon, the ABC icon. So something's off there, but it will work. I have tab completion, so that works. And if I, let's say, go down here, because VS Code does a bit of magic, Let's do city, and if I do L, and I just want to Alt-Tab, I'm still getting Paris and London because it's not respecting my input yet. So and if you implement the argument completely like that, just with an array, you will also have problems in ISE if you're still in the PowerShell 5.1. Okay, but it sort of works, which is quite neat. But if you want a simple implementation like this, in PowerShell 6, they introduced the attribute argument completions. And as you can see in this example, there's no script block. So argument completions is just meant to be, you put in an array of your values you want to present to someone without a script block. And that will give us our argument completers. So if now Alt-Tab, you will see we got a different icon. So that looks better. I can type in, I can choose my value, I can execute it, and if I go on the command line, so get pizza, I can do H, tab, and it will complete it to Hawaiian because it respects my input, which is great. Another thing is with argument completers and argument completions, I can also order salami pizza. So even though that salami wasn't in my list of suggestions, I can still input it because argument completions and argument completers are just hints. They're just offering you a value you can take, but you don't have to. And that's nice. Okay, so up to now, we just looked at static lists. So let's try and make our argument completers more dynamic, more useful, and we'll just go through this process together. So in this next example, I want to get my service. And this time I've got my argument completer, and in the script block, I'm just looking for the services on my computer. And I'm just retrieving the list and passing out the list. So I can go get my service. If I Alt-Tab, I can see I've got over 300 services on my computer. If you would run it, you get your services, not my services. So we've got a bit of dynamic argument completers added to that. But we still have the same issue as earlier. We haven't got the right icon. ISE will not cope with it very well. Console will. And if I say want to get my service bits, it still doesn't respect my input. So it's dynamic, but doesn't respect my input. Okay. Then let's try and get our output right. So I've got another one, my process, and here in the argument completer in the script block, I'm just retrieving all the running processes on my computer, filling a list with all the process names, and then I'm just taking each process and iterating through it with a for each loop, and then I'm creating a new result. So I'm not just returning the name of the process, I'm actually creating a list of completion results. And completion results is you pass in a couple of parameters. So the first parameter here is the value that gets injected or gets put in your parameter when you choose one. The second item here, which you have to put in, is the value that gets displayed to the user. So that can be, so you can display today, and when you hit enter, you will actually insert the date, for example. They can differ, or what you see. The next one is the icon. It's an enum. There are a couple of icons, but the icon we should use is parameter value. And if we have that, if we use the completion result and add the right icon, it will also work in ISE. Does anyone work with ISE still? You lucky bastards. Okay, and the last one is a tooltip. So when we get our completion, we'll just get a tooltip and you can have additional information. Okay, then let's just execute that. So, and now if I Alt-tab it, as you can see, first of all, we've got a nice icon. Next, we can see, okay, I've got a process called AI running, whatever that is, don't know, and AI item text. So, and if I choose it, only AI gets inserted. So that's that first value of that result, completion result object. And we've also got a tooltip, so you can add additional information to the tooltip. So if you want to explain what you're presenting to the user, which is nice, but to be honest, I don't use it. But it works if you want to. But we still have one issue. If I type A and Alt-tab, it still doesn't respect my input. So we got an argument completed that's dynamic, where that queries something locally, and our result is correct because we got the icons, we got the tooltips, but it doesn't respect our input, at least not yet. But we'll have a look at that now. So I've got another example. So get dog breed, because who doesn't like dogs or cats? But let's go for dogs. So here I've got one property, and that is a dog breed. And for this dog breed, I've got an argument completer. And this time, I'm adding this param block. And the param block consists of command name, parameter name, word to complete, command AST, and fake bound parameters. And so in command name, what's going to be populated in there? Get dog breed, of course. So the command which is calling it. Parameter name, just be the parameter name, which has been called from the word to complete. Now that's the interesting one. That is whatever you already typed into your in your console. All those characters. Command AST just gives you the whole command AST. I haven't found a good example where I can use it. If someone's got an idea how you could use it, I'd be very happy to hear about that. And we've got fake bound parameters. I want to explain them now. I'll explain them later. So this is just a param block for argument completers. Just remember it, copy, paste it. It has to look like that. And if you do that, it will work. So in this example, I'm actually carrying a REST method. So I'm calling out and getting a list of dog breeds and just saving the list of dog breeds in my variable. Then I'm going to iterate through my variables, my array. And I'm just going with a where object. I am looking where my value is like the word to complete with a star or wildcard. So it will filter out my results. And I only get those results presented that are valid for my input. And next, I will just go with a for each block and create the completion result. As you can see, I stick to the same value for the tooltip, what you get offered and what gets injected. So let's just load this function and we'll get dog breed. So I alt-tabbed, and every time I alt-tab, it goes out, queries the REST method, gets the results, and then I get presented. And then I got all my dogs. And on the command line, I'll do get dog breed, and I like Vizslas. Vizslas are lovely dogs, so I just type in a V, and now I'll tab. It will go out, query the REST method, come back, and filter it. The thing is, when you implement dynamic argument completers, be careful if you query a REST method, because then you're dependent on that REST method. If that doesn't work, your function will not work. It'll just... Christian?
One question. For the tooltip, for instance, would be also able to make another call against the API together if the API would offer me information about the dogs to display it there, right?
Okay, so the question was, Could I query the REST API again for the tooltip and inject information about the dog breed, let's say type of fur? Yeah, that would be totally possible. You just have to do a second query. So let's do dogs begin with SH. Also a couple. Great, works. So this now is dynamic. The output is correct. And it supports or respects what I already typed into my console. And it just makes it easy and simple and usable, put it that way. Okay, now we go to the fake bound parameters. So that was the last value in our parent block. And what the fake bound parameters are, it's just a hash table. And in a hash table, you'll have the parameters and the values the user already added to that function. So in this example, I've got two properties, two parameters. I've got a category, which is just a validate set. In this case, it's just a starter, main, and dessert, so what course I want. And in my parameter item, so that's the menu item, I've just got, I'm not querying anything, this is just a hash table with my different courses I can choose from. So what I want to achieve is, if I just say get menu item, I just want to have all the dishes I can choose from. But if I enter get menu item category starters, I just want to have all the starters presented. And that's what I can use the fake bound parameters for. So this is my food options. And then I'm going to just ask my fake bound parameters, is there a key category in there? If yes, I want to store the value of that element in a hash table. And then I'm just going to get all those food items for that category. And then I just go through the same process as we've already done, is word to complete to filter out the ones I want and create a completion result object. Shouldn't I have a fake bound parameter, then I just want all the results. Okay, so we do get menu item, category main, item, and if I alt tab, I only get my main courses. However, if I just do my items, I get all my items on the menu. So I can make it more dynamic depending on what the user's already input what has been in the past. Okay. I've got a second example for where I can use fake bound parameters. This time it's also querying an API and it's called getCountry. And here I've got, once again, I've got two parameters, a continent, which is in this case a validate set, but that could be other argument completed REST call, that could be anything, you can use it anywhere. So I've got my continents and then I'm just created an argument completer, and I'm just saying if I've got a fake bound parameter continents, then I want the value of the continent, and then I'll just get all the countries for that continent. If not, I'll just retrieve all countries that exist, and then I'll return the object. However, this time I'm actually looking if my result has white spaces. So because a country, United States of America, has got white spaces in between. And if I've got that, then I just want to add quotation marks around that value so my function can properly use it. If there are no white spaces, I just return the actual value. So let's have a look at that. Get country, and we'll do country, and it didn't work. It's not working. Demo gods are not kind to me. Sorry? Sorry. So let's do continent, Europe. It's not working. I have no idea why. Well, let me just restart my console. Okay, now get. I haven't got a typo, have I? No. I am not sure what's going wrong.
Just check if you could get the countries manually, just to see if the API.
Ah, okay, yeah. Oh. Haven't I got Wi-Fi or something? Okay, so this is a good example. Using a REST API you don't control can mess it up. So, but I've got a backup. Same function, different API from a different provider. Let's try that. Ah, here it works. Okay. Yeah, you should always be careful when you're using REST APIs or you connect to a database which is not on your under your control. So you always have to be careful about that. So I can do countries, and let's say Ukraine. That works fine. So we saw we had 250 odd countries listed, but if I do get country, continent, which continent? Let's do Europe. And I'll tab that. We'll only get European countries presented. And yeah, that's nice. Svalbard. And as you can see, I need the quotation marks. I have to add them to put that in properly. So this is another example. Yeah, so what we saw here is basically how argument completers work, and you know everything, more or less. And the actual implementation of the argument completer will stay the same, and all my examples will be very similar. The thing is, I added my argument completers to my function param block. So this has the issue, it makes it unreadable because you get just so much code in your param block. That's one downside, and the other downside, what if I've got another function which wants to use the same argument completer? I would have to keep copying and pasting the same amount of code, and every time I change the code, I would have to change it in all the functions which uses the same argument completer. Fortunately, there's a way around it, because some intelligent people at Microsoft had good ideas. So I've got this function, get event log name, and I haven't implemented any argument completer for this function or for the parameter log name. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the function register argument completer, that I can register argument completer from outside of the function. We can do that with a register argument completer. We just have to define for which function we want to register it for and for which parameter. And then we got this script block parameter, and in the script block we just add our argument completer script, and same param block, same result, completion result list, which we want to emit. So now registered, and now we can just go get event log name, and I'll tab and see we've got our result. So that's a good approach, but I still can't reuse my code because I've got one register argument completer and I've got the script in there. So the easiest way, obviously, or I hope it's obvious, is to save our script block in a variable. So this time, same procedure. I've just got a variable called argument completer script. In there, I've got a script block, and that's my argument completer script. And then I just register argument completer again. Just let me word wrap that. Register argument completer for this function, for this parameter, and instead of writing everything in the script block, I just pass in the variable. So if I've got another function which uses the same argument completer, I just write again, register argument completer, but this time for the different function, and reuse the argument completer script as often as I want. You mean? Okay, so the question is, can I have for multiple commands? I don't think so, but to be honest, I don't know. You can have wildcards. Okay. So James's minds, you can have wildcards. I'd have to look in that. Honestly, I don't know. Okay. Now, I know this guy, let's call him Henseeder. He complains about this register argument completer because he says, yeah, but then I can't see that my function has an argument completer attached to a certain parameter. But he still wants it reusable. So what you can do is basically, instead of using register argument completer, you could just use your argument completer attribute, and in a script block, you pass in your variable with a script block in it, and then we just have to invoke it. And now the most important part, you have to pass in $arguments, args, because in that you've got the word to complete and the word to complete and the fake bound parameters and the stuff you need. So this would be a way of reusing your script block, but still having it defined in the function, so anyone else who looks at your function knows, there's an argument completer registered for that parameter, and it makes it a bit tidy because I haven't got that big script block in it anymore. So that should work. So let's just proof that it works. I'll tab, works, and I get the language spoken there. You could also go do something similar, but instead of passing in your script block and invoking that with the arguments, you could just write a function and pass it in the function, and the function gets those arguments. So in this example, I've got an argument completer function, which is just called getCountryList. It's got our known param block, which we always need, and then you can just implement it as a function, and then just pass it in. Not an approach I would personally take, but it works. But it works. There's a proof. So that's more or less the basic concept of argument completers. What I want to show you now is a real world example. So I've got this module for Octopus Deploy. That's a tool I use a lot, and I've written a module for Octopus Deploy, and this module has 80 odd functions, and it all revolves around projects and tenants and releases, and each of these parameters are used in dozens of functions of that project. And I'm lazy, and I hate writing code, and I hate updating things. So what I did is, just as an example, I've got all these argument completer script blocks all saved in some variable with a more or less sensible name. As you can see, it's got quite a few, all individual argument completers for the module. Then in the next step, I register argument completers that are not, just let me put on the word wrap. Argument completers where it doesn't have a certain schema, so I register argument completer for tenants, for the function get tenant for the parameter name. So these are my custom registered argument completers. But for the majority of things, when I load up the module, I just grab the module, I'm just loading, I get each command of the whole module, and then I'll just iterate through each command, and then just say, if my command has the parameter tenant, if my command, which is just iterating through, contains a parameter called tenant, then I just want to register this argument completer for this command, for the parameter tenant, with this script block. And so I don't care if I've got 20 functions or 30 or 50 functions all using that same parameter. If I write a new function which has a parameter called tenant, as soon as I load the module, it will automatically get registered. So I don't have to think about it anymore. And so I don't have to do anything. And what I do, or what we do in our company, is we always have a function called argument completer PS1 in our private folder of our modules, and all the developers know the argument completers are stored there, and just look at it. And then you know about it. Okay, so basically I thought my talk would be finished now. But when researching, I found the new kid on the block, which is argument completer classes. And this is something that came in I think 7.2 or 7.3. So new stuff for me, at least. And they were implemented as class-based argument completers to make it easier for C# developers to add argument completers in a C# project. But they couldn't, or they can be beneficial for your normal PowerShell scripting. So let's have a look at them. So the difference when you do an argument completer or class-based argument completers is you create your own argument completer, with your own definition, with your own name, and you can actually add parameters to that argument completer, your parameters which you can define. So what you could do is you could build a generic argument completer, and depending on the arguments you pass in, you can reuse it for different things. And you only have to build one. So in this example, this is a date range completion. So the only thing it does, it offers me dates and 7 days in the past and 7 days into the future, and my date should have a certain format. If I want to reuse this argument completer, I could just put the same argument completer in a different function and say, oh, but I only want 1 day in the past and 14 days in the future, and I want the date to have a different format, just as an example. Another example would be, for example, if you get an argument completer for Git commits, and then you could have a variable you put in, which is which branch. So you could just change its behavior depending on what you add as a property. They are pretty cool, but you need quite a lot of boilerplate code to get it up and running. And I just want to quickly go through the code, not in detail, just so that you have a bit of an idea what they look like. I will upload all the code so you can just copy and paste and look at it yourself after the talk. So the first thing we need for a class-based argument completer is the class, which is called whatever you want to call your argument completer. In this case, it's date range completion attribute. The attribute is not mandatory. It's just a device or best practice to always add attribute at the end. And this inherits from argument completer attribute and has got an interface. So in this case, I define my class variables. So those variables I need to put in from the outside. In this case, it's my days back, days forward, and the format of the date. And then I have a constructor where I can just pass in my values. So here are my 3 values, my days in the past, days forward, format, and assign them to the instance variables then. What you can also do is add your own constructors if you want different options. I've done an example here, but yeah, I have to think about it. And then you have to create a create method. This then calls another class, which we also have to implement. And this class gets called with our instance variables. So let's scroll all the way up and look at the class we also have to implement. So we have to implement another class which inherits from which uses the interface iArgument completer. It's got its class variables. That's all the properties we need for it. It's got the constructor, which we called, where we assign the variables, and then we have to create a method called complete argument, and that is a list of type completion result. And now it starts to get familiar again. So here we've got all our usual arguments, our words to complete, our command name, our parameter name, and so on. And now I can just go in and implement my argument completer as I've always done. So I go back 7 days, depending on the days, I go back, get the dates, format the dates, and then I just add the completion result to my result list. And of course, that again has these values I have to add. The hints, the icons and whatsoever. And I do that for my dates in the past and then my dates in the future. As I said, this is just an example. So if we go in here, we get our dates, easy. So I've got dates in the past, and as you can see, the hint, it says today and yesterday. So you can tweak it a bit the way you want. So that's the good thing about that, so we can use that. But then I can say, oh, maybe I need in a different function, I need the date in a different format. So we can just, by changing what I pass into my argument completer on a function level, on the parameter block, I can just change its behavior. And we can see we get less results and the format changes. So that's just a way I control the argument completers. I haven't fully come up with an idea where I can use this in production, but I'm sure one of you guys is going to come up with a great idea. So what's the conclusion? Argument completers are our friend. It makes scripts more user-friendly. They can be super simple, as you saw in a couple of examples, but they can be quite complex. And always, if you have dynamic argument completers, always think about where you get your data from. Because if that endpoint of your REST API is broken, as we saw, it will fail. And it doesn't even give you an error, which is a bit of a bummer. And use the right argument completer for the job. So if you just have a simple list, use argument completions. It's the easiest way. And yeah, hopefully have fun with them. Questions?
Easy way to, you can imagine like countries aren't changing that often, so making the API call every single time.
Yes.
Like the most efficient, or is there some easy way that you know to cache out data?
Yeah, so the question was, is there an easy way to cache the data for like calls which don't change a lot because countries don't normally change within a few minutes? Yeah, if you got it in a module, you could just like, when you import the module, query the countries, store it in a script, in the script scope, in a variable in script scope, and then you can just access them. You could put it in a text file and just read the text file every time you call the argument completer. You don't necessarily have to go out and query the API. Totally. I mean, you can do anything with argument completers. It doesn't matter what you call. It could be a REST API, it could be your local services, but it could be anything else. It could be a database query. So that's why I use it sometimes. I just query the database to get my information.
I might have just missed, but when you were showing an example of parameter values that had space in them, were you adding quotes?
Yes, you have to. You have to add the quotes. Just let me look. Yeah, here. So basically, I'm just taking the results and looking if I've got white spaces in the results. If yes, I'll just put single quotation marks around it.
Oh, okay. So you weren't adding them internally, you were adding them here, so you select them.
Exactly. Yes.
Same thing like if you return a semicolon,
Yeah.
don't hold that, your argument is start.
Yeah. Another thing is, in the examples I showed you, I had word to complete star, but you could also have star word to complete star. So you can filter the results any way you want, what fits your needs. Chris?
As a side note, I've checked you can have multiple comment names, and a comment name parameter for just the argument completer.
Okay, so Christian just did a bit of research and said you can add multiple commands to register argument completer. But they would also all have to be registered to the same parameter name. So if you like mix and match, you'll have to have multiple. Yeah, thank you. Okay.
You want to see an actual argument completer usefulness one? You want to show it real quick? I can show you.
Yeah.
Go to my GitHub, go to Jazz Pimp.
What is it?
Justin Grody. And then /JAZ.
JAZ. Dot?
PIM.
PIM.
Go to source. Don't worry about what it is. Go to public. And then go to enable AD role.
Enable AD role.
And so right there at the top, that's a class-based argument completer that fetches the element. So this is a thing for like Pimp activations. If you don't know what that is, it just lets you. Basically, it's a completer that is an example of like fetching what roles you're actually eligible for. So like, just hit tab and find out. I have options of being exchange administrator or whatever. So if you hit tab there, then this does that work. So you'll see it's mostly the same as anything else. It's just done in a class, and then it's added otherwise. But there's some little fun trinkets in there. Like one annoying thing. I don't know if you talked about this, Emrys, but like dealing with errors in your argument.
Oh, that's horrible.
Fail silently.
Yeah.
So if you look at that example, there's a try catch, and so if there's an error, it just right posts in red. So if your argument completer has an error, at least it'll show it.
Yeah.
Then you don't have to. So that's another thing. It's like you write argument completers, exceptions get silently swallowed. So if you do a tab and nothing works, you have to have some way to.
Exactly. That's what we just saw earlier, because the REST API called for the country is the first one that failed, and just nothing happens. It blocks it.
Yeah. So you can still use a try catch on your code and surface it with like a right post or something, so you can at least know something wrong.
Does right host work? Because I thought it didn't work.
Huh?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Time's up, and thank you.